And the most remarkable thing about this, I think, over the last 10 years has been just the growth of this community and the degree to which it's jazz across so many different sectors, people working in sound, people working in immersive media, generative art. I mean, that's been the most gratifying thing about it. And this seems like it's a remarkable moment. This is a medium and a form that's really defining itself. This whole effort that we've been doing this year and next on immersive media storytelling, in many ways, is growing very quickly. You see it getting recognized by investment in the space and many artists working in it. When we started this, the Gray Area started in a little white box gallery because we imagined this would all take place on screens on the wall. And then we realized, well, actually it's 360, it's immersive, it could be anything, and we ended up in a theater. So thank you, Josette, for leading us into that. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that this is a crossroads not only among our community, but there's so many other partners and people who are part of this festival who are doing amazing things here. And it's exciting to see both San Francisco and Gray kind of as a nexus for the invention of this new medium. With us as a lead sponsor is Verizon, who got interested because as they move towards 5G networks, how is AR and VR and immersive storytelling and collaborative storytelling a part of the future use of the network? They're interested in experimenting with us on that. A lot of the work we're doing on immersive media has been supported by the Knight Foundation. They're supporting our experimental research lab, spatial research lab, because the question is, can these things be turned into properties that artists can make money at, that can go on the road? Is this a form of business, just as gaming became a new form of business? Meow Wolf is with us, and they've had explosive growth, and now we're exploring how do these media move out. So this conference is really a nexus of a lot of that. NEA is here trying to grow these new forms of media. We have the Goethe Institute that has been a big pioneer in all of this, Creative Capital, and the city of San Francisco. And to me, what's exciting is that all of these kind of forces are coming together to explore and develop these new forms of media. And what we're really trying to do here is then think through how do you tell stories with it and help this explain and help us work through a time of great technological change. Another interesting thing about the Bay Area or about the tech community is we often don't have a sense of history. We're so excited about being present in the church of what's happening now that we often don't look back and say, did this happen before? What are the roots? And as we started preparing for this festival, I remember a few months ago, and I was all excited about the work that we were doing with the Knight Foundation and in immersive media, and I'd seen Rhizomatics come through here, and then I ran into a friend of mine who was a collaborator who had worked with Andy Warhol 50 years ago doing immersive media, and I'm like, that happened? And then he started explaining to me about the extraordinary community and ideas that were the antecedents of what we were doing. And I thought that was amazing, and I kind of went on a journey to New York and then to Portland, Oregon to learn more about it, and then I was in Europe kind of understanding all that. So I wanted to share with you today a little of what I ran into that was the path to where we are today in all this media. I'll switch to this mic now. So I call this Mind Split Open, how Andy Warhol's 1966 intermedia explosion opened a wormhole to now. And you should know that by May of 1966, Andy Warhol turned his attention to bringing together every form of media he could imagine and immersing audiences in it. He hit the road with the Velvet Underground, and he was blasting images everywhere and exposing a generation to the exploding plastic inevitable. Now, if you had been in this production that he was creating, the experience was total. There were 5 film projectors showing different reels of the same film simultaneously, and there were a similar number of slide projectors, but those were moved by hand so that the images could sweep the auditorium. There were 4 variable speed strobe lights, 3 moving spots with an assortment of colored gels. There were pistol lights and a mirror ball, one hanging from the ceiling and one rising from the floor. In addition to the band, there were 3 loudspeakers blaring different pop records all at once in 1966. Now, how do you explain that? You know, whenever you bring out something new in tech, there's no frame of reference. How do you explain the first personal computer? Marketers reverted to speeds and feeds, and so Warhol did this. He spelled it out. Do you want to dance and blow your mind with ultrasounds? We'll have movies. There'll be lightworks, also slides. Our show will include visions, and it will be all in the same place at the same time. This is the classic product ad written by an engineer who doesn't quite understand it from the customer's perspective, but is excited to share with you everything that might be in there. This was in March of 1966. By Memorial Day, the act moved west. And whatever it was, 6 weeks later in May, that disaggregated list of features was fully branded by the West Coast psychedelic music scene as the next big thing. It emerged as pop-op rock, with Warhol as the headliner, with the Velvet Underground and the Mothers of Invention as kind of lower down. Now, you think this is the perfect match, right? Here's a set of ideas from one coast. It's come west to the Bay Area community, soon to be Silicon Valley, and now those ideas will scale, but not quite. See, this was San Francisco the year before the Summer of Love. Bill Graham had just opened the Fillmore. This was his 6th performance, and the whole New York transmedia scene was a bit too transgressive, a bit too aggressive for him. So Graham's reaction to all of this was, "You disgusting germs from New York? Here we are trying to clean up everything, and you come out here with your disgusting minds and whips." Now, the exploding plastic inevitable, which we now know as the world's first deeply immersive media experience, was booked for 3 nights at the Fillmore, but on the second night, the band walked off the stage, having left their instruments against the amplifiers, creating a great bit of feedback, which Graham called the barrage of sonic feedback, and he nixed the 3rd act. So here we had 2 cultures coming together. Mary Warrenoff, who was one of the New York dancers, characterized this New York tech culture and the Bay Area culture in year 1 before the Summer of Love thusly. She said, "You know, we from New York, we were on amphetamines, they were on acid. They were so slow to speak with those wide-eyed, oh wow, so into their vibrations, we spoke rapid machine fire. They were homophobic, we were homosexual. They were barefoot, we had platform boots. They were eating bread they baked themselves, and we never ate at all." Okay, Lou Reed from the Velvet Underground returned this cultural favor. He said, "You know, we have vast objections to that whole San Francisco scene. It's tedious, untalented, they can't play. You know, people like Jefferson Airplane and the Grateful Dead, they're just the most untalented group of people. And just look at them physically. I mean, can you take Grace Slick seriously? It's a joke, I tell you." Now, even though these cultures weren't mixing, there was an important legacy that was left behind. And it is that Warhol's lighting engineer, Danny Williams, pioneered a lot of the innovations that became part of the canon of the Fillmore and of rock. All of the lighting and the sound and the strobes, that whole thing Graham kept while rejecting the content side of things. And it became kind of part of the scene here. Now, there is a tradition of tension of one coast punking the other when it comes to new media art. At the first Gray Area Festival in 2015, the New York Collective Free Art and Technology put on a terrific retrospective here, curated by Lindsay Howard. But mostly, the New York crew was pissed at the West Coast crew because we had completely commercialized and siloed internet culture. And they expressed this lament with a giant portrait of Eric Schmidt painted in, they never actually told us what medium they used to paint Eric Schmidt. But they had read Marshall McLuhan, and they knew that their medium was going to make the message stick on us at Gray Area. TechCrunch explained this thusly about the artist who made a portrait of Schmidt in poop, which, by the way, we didn't know it was painted in merde. There's other words for it, until TechCrunch was in front of us, and then they revealed, well, yes, we painted this in shit. So these tensions continue. And transgression always seems to be at the root of these transmedia things. There's actually a whole root that's around democracy, and if you've read Fred Turner's The Democratic Surround, there's an inclusive piece. The New York group was pioneering another one. The predecessor of the electroplastic inevitable was launched by Warhol in New York at a hotel ballroom and the New York Society for Cynical Psychiatry. There were pornographic movies, the 24 projectors, the Velvet Underground, Nico, and to this, one astonished psychiatrist to the New York Times, when asked a question, said to them, "If you want to do something for mental health, kill the story." Okay, but it turns out that all of this was coming out of the New York underground film scene. And that film scene was moving away from traditional cinema and trying to explore all sorts of new ways of telling stories. Could cinema, for example, lose its linear form and surround all of us with multiple screens and multiple narratives, or perhaps no narratives at all? This was all part of the scene of moving away from linear print culture into immersive culture, stuff that McLuhan called acoustic space. Sheldon Renan, who coined the term American underground film, wanted to know, could we expand cinema to the point where the effective film might be produced without film at all? And in that same year, 1966, this expanded arts diagram was created that actually painted the whole landscape. So it starts in prehistory with Byzantine iconoclasm and now moves into fluxus, theater events. It connects up with acoustic theater with John Cage, immersive kinesthetic theater, expanded cinema, and that also blasts into things like international expositions and Walt Disney spectacles. There's this whole theory that came from Fred Turner on the democratic surround, on how the State Department used this choice in cinema, choice of what you get to see, to promote democracy. And then we have the more transgressive stuff all the way up to fantastic art and happenings. There's a whole conversation about happenings. So all of this in 1966. And into all this came a number of people. How many people here know Marshall McLuhan? Excellent. So Marshall McLuhan, in the 1960s, the author of Understanding Media, coined the term "the medium is the message" and "the global village." He understood a great deal of this, and this is actually seen from his book, "The Medium is the Massage." There you see the electric plastic inevitable being blasted there. Now, I think McLuhan was onto something that resonates today with our mission here at Gray Area. At a time of great change, it takes artists to help understand where technology and media are going, and to distinguish field from ground, and to experiment and understand technology, to push us beyond the product boundaries into understanding what new technologies mean, and also when they have social consequences, to help us have our dreams and nightmares and make sense of these tools. But please, don't take my word for it. Ladies and gentlemen, to help frame this year's Gray Area Festival, please welcome Marshall McLuhan.
The chances of your understanding anything going on in your own time are very small, except through the means or media provided by artists. Artists are people who enjoy living in the present.
Since the time of the Renaissance, we have been contained by a visual monopoly. Art was rigid and kept us out of the frame. Today, art is anything you can get away with.
My own way of testing the sorts of effects that any new form is likely to have on us is to keep a sharp lookout on changing styles in the arts. The artist is always a jump ahead of technology and is engaged really in giving you images of what sort of effects it's likely to have upon you later on. The effect of the electric revolution is to create once more an involvement that is total.
In the mid-'60s, this conversation was everywhere. I learned about it by talking to my friend John Brockman, who actually programmed and created a lot of the electric plastic inevitable, because he was doing expanded cinema for Lincoln Center back then. There's Brockman on the left with Warhol and Bob Dylan. And Brockman was telling me about all of the exciting ideas that were coming in from artists and from scientists. Into that ferment, Robert Rauschenberg brought in Norbert Weiner, the founder of cybernetics. John Cage introduced the ideas of Claude Shannon, who created information theory. And of course, here was Marshall McLuhan. All of these people were at work at the founding moment of all of this. And you can see this in some of the reviews, how people were connecting art to technology to its implications. Here, for example, from the Detroit Free Press in 1966, a review of this show: have you ever considered what your role in society will be after the impending cybernetic revolution, when machines do all the manual labor and computers run all the machines? That from 1966. 66 was also the year that the very first kind of virtual reality headset got created. This is Ivan Sutherland's work at the MIT Lincoln Laboratory, and it was vector graphics, but it was the first exploration into all of this. I asked Sheldon Renan, who was part of this era, well, is this where it started? Did it start at MIT in 1966? He says, no. You have to take it back to the Macy conferences in the 1940s, where scientists and artists came together to consider the implications of all of this. I asked him, is that when it started? Sheldon tells me it really goes back to the invention of the telegraph, the first time we realized we were creating a global community. And now, fast forward to today. Warhol was obsessed with creating art that fetishized consumer culture and consumed with producing media that consumes you. So if we fast forward to now, his progeny, Instagram culture at the Museum of Ice Cream, here are consumers consuming nothing and eager to pay for it. It's media and narrative deconstructed. And in many ways, that creates our opportunity here. What are the ways we can add story back to this? Well, Meow Wolf is doing an amazing job of this, adding story and immersive media, and they're expanding. They raised $100 million, and they're now going to expand into a space in Las Vegas, a 250,000 square foot Area 15 space that will be further expanding and exploring all of these. I was in Paris recently at Atelier de Lumière, a space that is vast, full of projection, and asking how do you reinterpret traditional art. Here this week, we've had Inferno, which, as you may know, because it's back there, audiences are clad in these exoskeletons. It's a machine, it's a performance about surrendering to a form of hell, about machines taking control. The amazing thing is yesterday when Louis-Philippe Demer talked about it, he said, you know, we actually thought we were building a work that would upset people, but people enjoyed being controlled. We didn't expect this. We thought people would be uncomfortable. This is an interesting and happy discovery. We have to learn how to deal with it. And if you read all the reviews that came out in the last few weeks, people were just thrilled to submit and see where they had control and where the machine had control. It's kind of the beginning of interspecies art or jazz. You can also see this in Rhizomatics, and they were here earlier this year and last year, right? This is a dance company. The dancers are outfitted with sensors. Machine vision knows where they are. An avatar is created through machine learning that they're reacting with. In the first part of the show, humans lead. Later on, the machine leads. But when so many of our robot stories are about how we're taken down, this is actually about how man-machine culture can lift us up, culturally enliven us. And this story is spreading, thanks to all of you and to our great team at Gray Area. My friend Maria was going to work the other day, and there she wrote, she just tweeted this out, found this gem on the street, open to this very page in downtown San Francisco today. So we are sharing the machine hell with people. And you know, all of this stuff is coming together in the Experimental Space Research Lab here that the Knight Foundation's funding. And right, the whole reason behind this is how can we tell meaningful stories, spread these ideas so that artists can get paid, and so this can become a medium. That's really what this week has been all about. It's interesting, when we started this, the original thinking was perhaps the topic of this year's exploration should be dystopian things like privacy or machine control. But both the artists and other people we're talking to was like, no, why don't we explore something that's more the whole systems view of the world? So the theme of the research lab is really reworlding, living systems. How can we experience kinesthetically, emotionally, the systems things that are driving climate change and the connectedness of the world that are important today. In many ways, this brings us back to those 1960s thoughts. Those 1960s thinkers, people like Buckminster Fuller and E.F. Shoemaker, they were considering how do you build a more connected, holistic world. The artists were beginning to experience that. Now we live in a time when that's essential because of the nature of the world, the nature of climate change. And so all that stuff comes together in these explorations, but with a very strong debt of gratitude to our ancestors in all of this. So the next time somebody tells you that Andy Warhol led to Instagram, and you can say, yeah, that's true, but he was in on the joke. He was also an amazingly porous artist who was a vessel for all sorts of media that helped him process his time and work which has stood the test of time. So here we are again, only more so, with more immersive media, more interconnected change, and time yet again to split minds wide open. So thank you for coming.